The moment you gained the power of creation, the hospital diagnosed you with late-stage stomach cancer. So, to stay alive, you turned your family's orchard into a sandbox world, hoping to create a civilization that could cure terminal illnesses. You cranked the time speed up to 100x, and as ancient people kept exploring your square-shaped world, they were stunned to discover that this world had a mysterious god as tall as a mountain, and you even gave each civilization's heroes a chance to ask you questions. Whenever they asked how many days it took you to create the world, you remembered yourself digging dirt and building the sandbox. So you answered, "It took me a full 7 days to create this land." And just like that, the legend of God creating all things in only 7 days spread across the land. Inside your sandbox, civilizations rose and fell again and again. But who could have guessed that all those dazzling civilizations started from a single spore? Back then, you built an artificial shallow pond in the orchard and mixed the water with the right amount of salt to turn it into an ocean. Then you dropped a huge batch of insectoid spores into the central ocean and set their cell division speed to 10,000x. In other words, every real-world day meant 10,000 years inside the sandbox. Even so, by the 5th day, meaning 50,000 years later, those single-celled organisms had only just begun evolving into plankton. Soon you saw the ocean turning murky, so you quickly placed a genetic lock, limiting the size of the spore-based life forms. After all, your orchard only had so much space. You couldn't let these creatures evolve into giants. On the afternoon of day 6, multicellular life finally appeared in the seawater. In just a few minutes, it looked like a nature documentary on fast forward. These plankton-like species were born and died within seconds, then gave rise to the next generation. But when the sun set, just as expected, the sandbox world faced its first mass extinction. 12 hours of night meant 5,000 years without sunlight. Huge patches of aquatic plants withered and sank to the seafloor. Under the night sky, everything went lifeless. Your sandbox was too small. According to Darwinian evolution, such a tiny population base was not enough to evolve a new species adapted to the environment. But then you remembered that this ocean was filled with extremely adaptable insectoid single cells, so you couldn't help hoping they would surprise you. Half an hour after moonlight spilled across the water, a flash of blue suddenly appeared on the ocean surface covered in dead plants. It was a blue plant about the size of an ant, shaped like a leaf. You never expected that without direct sunlight, this plant could still photosynthesize using moonlight. Amazed, you named the plant blue silver grass. After surviving the first mass extinction, blue silver grass began a new stage of evolution. It not only adapted to the night, but also evolved edges and round pads. Like lotus leaves spread across the sea, it could absorb moonlight over a wide area from above the yard. Another hour passed. After tens of thousands of generations of evolution, blue silver grass began branching into different forms, even splitting into 2 distinct species. One group kept absorbing moonlight and improving its conversion efficiency, while another actually turned into carnivorous plants. They began hunting other blue silver grass, using moonlight to give off a faint glow that lured other blue silver grass over, then devoured them. Watching this, you couldn't help sighing. After surviving the first great extinction, the only aquatic plant left alive had developed into a diverse evolutionary system. Maybe I should record the sandbox's evolution in eras, just like Earth's timeline. With that thought, you quickly found a black notebook, opened to the first page of Genesis, and wrote, "Dark Cambrian, the world changed, the sun set, the moon rose, and the world fell into 5,000 years of darkness. 99% of ocean life went extinct. Only blue silver grass survived by absorbing moonlight, becoming the ruler of the new era." After finishing the entry and closing the notebook, you looked at the pond that had become an ocean of life, and you couldn't help getting excited. Based on Earth's evolutionary history, if life kept reproducing, sea animals would be next. So what would your insectoid cells evolve into? The thought kept you so excited you couldn't sleep all night. When day 7 finally began, the ocean did not evolve new creatures like you expected. Instead, another mass extinction hit. Under intense sunlight, all kinds of thriving blue silver grass rapidly withered. By the afternoon, another touch of blue slowly recovered among the dead plants. It was a 5-pointed star-shaped blue silver grass, and it had survived this extinction. After that, it began its own mutation and evolution. To adapt to the harsh sunlight, it transformed under the burning sun and rapidly produced generation after generation. In just a few minutes, the surviving blue silver grass grew darker and darker, eventually forming a field of black star-shaped seaweed. Across the entire ocean, no other species was left to compete with it for survival. Watching it all unfold, you were deeply moved. Soon you named it Zizhao and recorded it in the black notebook. Zizhao, the hunter that endured daylight, continued living peacefully in the ocean. It could now withstand 5,000 years of alternating sun and moon. At the same time, thanks to the photosynthesis of many other aquatic plants, oxygen levels in the seawater rose sharply. The conditions for marine animals had finally arrived. Soon, the single-celled life in the sandbox ocean began to evolve. The first to appear were black-shelled bugs, similar to Earth's early predators called ancestor beasts. From then on, marine animals stepped onto the stage of evolutionary history. The moment you saw animals appear, you finally smiled with relief. Dragging your exhausted body after staying up for a full day and night, you went back to your room and passed out. When you woke up, it was already the 8th day of the Spore Sandbox's creation. Some marine animals were no longer satisfied with the fiercely competitive ocean. They gradually evolved toes and webbed scales, becoming amphibians and living along the barren coast. You quickly recorded this third era after the Light Cambrian and named it the Newborn Era. Newborn Era. The first marine animals appeared and became the dominant life forms of the age. After writing that, you quietly closed the notebook. Earth's eras included the Cambrian, Ordovician, and Silurian, while yours were the Dark Cambrian, Light Cambrian, and Newborn Era. Although your spores were about to evolve into land-dwelling species, evolving intelligent life would still take several long eras. Then an idea suddenly hit you. What if you cut your hand and dropped a little blood in? If some ocean species absorbed your genes, could they evolve intelligent life faster? But since the idea was way too bold, you decided to play it safe and test the evolution of intelligent species using other genes first. With that in mind, you immediately left for the zoo and, using a college research project as an excuse, bought a vial of chimpanzee blood. By the time you returned to the orchard, the terrifying reproduction speed of species that had crawled onto land had turned the sandbox into a miniature ecosystem. Strange trees covered the mountains and plains, and animals swam through the rivers. Luckily, you had restricted their breeding range, preventing the sandbox from being overrun. Then you walked into the massive 100-acre test field and eventually chose a beetle-like creature. You placed them into a brand new testing field, then injected them with chimpanzee blood and accelerated the flow of time in the field. After 2 days of testing, thousands of beetle-like creatures had died. From them, you selected the few with the most successful blood fusion and named them Chongyuan. Their appearance was very close to human. The difference was that they had round black armor growing on their backs. You spent 2 days testing this Chongyuan species. Inside the sandbox, that was the equivalent of 20,000 years. By now, some even stronger species had already appeared. The sandbox had entered a terrifying age similar to the Jurassic. The largest were beasts with black discs on their heads, about the size of a kitten. To the ant-sized Chongyuan, they were basically dinosaurs. After that, you released the Chongyuan clan into a valley in the south and set the time speed to 100 years per day. Early the next morning, you rushed straight to the sandbox to check on that batch of Chongyuan and see how far their civilization had evolved. By now, the Chongyuan had formed a basic tribal structure and even developed a simple language and culture. But they were still far too weak to resist the massive beasts in the sandbox. Looks like I need to give them a spark of civilization. As you thought it over, you rushed an order for a miniature welcoming pine and custom-made an exquisite alloy greatsword. By the time those two things arrived, a day and a half had passed. For the insect apes, that meant 150 years. By then, the insect ape tribe inside the terrarium was dwindling, so I set the time flow to 1.1 and stepped inside. The insect ape tribe had already fallen out of balance and begun to mutate. A few males growled for the women and children to retreat. Then they swung clubs made from some unknown beast's bones and charged straight at several giant creatures called Ara. But the gap in power wasn't even close. Within moments, those male insect apes became food for the Ara. Watching from a distance, I couldn't help feeling sorry for them. As I strode forward, the fleeing insect apes felt the earth begin to shake. In the ancient, savage forest, countless beasts fled in panic. The Ara that had been tearing into the insect ape corpses were crushed under my foot in an instant. Seeing this, every insect ape let out a cry of shock. What is that thing? How can something be that huge? It's 10,000 times bigger than Humbaba, the largest 100-meter beast. I understood the insect ape's language, but I paid no mind to their shock. Just then, a young insect ape looked up at me and shouted stubbornly, "You giant monster, are you here to eat us too? Why are we so weak?" I was surprised by the courage of this little insect ape, so I reached down, gently lifted him into my palm and asked, "Gilgamesh, do you want to change all of this?" In an instant, the little insect ape began to tremble. In this world, there was actually a 10,000-foot giant with intelligence. "Why did you call me Gilgamesh?" Hearing that, I still answered calmly. "A name is one sign of wisdom." At that, Gilgamesh suddenly grew excited. "We can talk, so we're both intelligent species. And you're clearly so powerful, so why won't you save us? If you won't save us, why come to me?" The insect apes thought I was an intelligent being similar to a giant beast. I had no intention of explaining, so I carried Gilgamesh in one hand and walked toward the mountains. Vast stretches of forest and wildlife were flattened beneath me. The next second, my booming voice echoed across the sky. "Look, every species in this world is the same. Why should I save only you? Just because you have wisdom? I can't save you directly, but I can give you the tools of civilization. Civilization is fire, knowledge, and order. It is also the power intelligent beings use to protect themselves. Use civilization to save yourselves." Hearing this, Gilgamesh went into a daze. Seeing that, I placed him on my shoulder and returned to the canyon. Then I planted an online-bought welcoming pine in the soil. It was only 2 feet tall, but to this miniature land, it was an endless divine tree towering into the clouds. Do you see the tree I just planted? If you want the power of civilization, climb the divine tree and prove your courage. This is my trial of your wisdom and bravery. As I spoke, I placed a custom-made metal giant sword and a kerosene-soaked match at the top of the tree. After a moment, I added a capsule too. It was a byproduct from my earlier experiments on the insect apes, containing termite genes. The next moment, my booming voice rang in Gilgamesh's ears again. These are the 3 treasures of civilization. The Sword of Damocles is the weapon that protects civilization. Only a species that can use tools truly deserves to be called intelligent. The sacred torch burns with blazing fire. It is the bridge that sustains civilization. The blood of power will grant you unmatched strength if you survive its baptism. Only the bravest warrior in the world may take it. If you want to change your people's fate, climb the divine tree before the torch goes out, and claim the 3 treasures of civilization. With that, I gently placed the tiny insect ape on the ground, then strode away under the stunned gazes of the others. The moment I left the terrarium, I sped up its time flow by 100 times. That way, a match that could only burn for 10 seconds would burn for several days from the creature's point of view. Then I watched clearly through a telescope as young Gilgamesh, face set with determination, began climbing the divine tree. Even though he fell countless times in just a few seconds, he kept getting back up and climbing again. After a dozen seconds or so, he finally reached the top. After countless failures, Gilgamesh now stood at the peak of the divine tree, raising the sword of Damocles high, his determined face filled with confidence. That moment would be recorded as eternal. Tens of millions of years later, archaeologists discovered the short-lived Sumerian dynasty, the Hymn of Sumer written for a great king, and the oldest known text, Genesis, ancient history of Sumer. It recorded that a sacred-faced intelligent giant beast, 10,000 feet tall, came crushing mountains and rivers beneath his steps. He planted the divine tree, set a trial of wisdom, and handed the 3 treasures of civilization to the young hero king Gilgamesh. When I woke up the next morning, a full century had passed in the terrarium world. For the insect apes, whose average lifespan was only 40 to 50 years, 2 generations had already come and gone. The Gilgamesh who had received the torch of civilization back then had not died of old age. Instead, he gave me a huge surprise. During the first 10 years after I left, Gilgamesh continued leading the insect apes in flight. He used the fire of wisdom to cook food, drive off giant beasts, and provide warmth on cold nights. And with the sword of Damocles, Gilgamesh slaughtered countless savage beasts. In the second 10 years, Gilgamesh outgrew his youth, became towering and powerful, and rose as the strongest hunter of the insect apes. His tribe began calling him the Hero King. He even burned the land with fire to make it fertile, then began farming and living a simple agricultural life. He also created the first cuneiform script and refined their language. Gilgamesh believed he was the first intelligent being to open the door to civilization, so he recorded the history of his own civilization in books and hymns, shamelessly naming it Genesis. He had 131 beautiful wives in the tribe, and most of his children were strong and powerful, inheriting both his build and his wisdom. But the insect ape's average lifespan was only 40 years, and Gilgamesh had already reached old age. He sat calmly on a massive chair woven from Ara pelts. Then he quietly took out the blood of power from long ago, and murmured the words the intelligent giant beast had once spoken. Only the bravest warrior in the world may take this 3rd treasure of civilization. Am I the bravest warrior in the world? With that, Gilgamesh cut open his arm and poured the blood of power into the wound. A wave of unbearable pain hit him instantly. Gilgamesh collapsed to the ground and began thrashing violently. He had fought through countless battles in his life, but he had never gasped in such agony. In the end, he survived the brink of death and slowly stood up. His long hair had turned completely silver, and his flawless face looked like that of a god. Meanwhile in the tribe, Gilgamesh's son Aga of Kish stood on high ground and raised the sword of Damocles, announcing that he would inherit the position of the next chief. Aga of Kish was wise, brave, talented, and virtuous. Compared with his brutal, arrogant father, he looked far more like a kind and worthy leader. Gilgamesh knew this too, which was why in his old age he had been willing to pass the throne to him. But now everything was different. Even though Aga of Kish had never once thought of stealing his father's position, Gilgamesh would not allow even the slightest hidden threat to exist. I have returned and the throne is still mine. That day, blood was spilled, and screams echoed through the Sumerian tribe. Hero King Gilgamesh reclaimed the chief's seat. During the first decade of Gilgamesh's second life, he led his people to build houses from stone. The insect apes officially entered a stone age built to resist giant beasts. After taking the blood of power, Gilgamesh now possessed termite genes. He chose to challenge the most terrifying 100-meter beast on the land, the legendary Humbaba. It was the very creature that had once evolved to the maximum body size allowed inside my terrarium. Gilgamesh and Humbaba battled for 3 full days and nights. The earth split, canyons collapsed, and countless giant beasts fled through the forest. That day, Gilgamesh returned soaked in blood, one hand gripping the sword of Damocles, the other dragging Humbaba's 100-meter corpse. People cried and held each other. Under their great Sumerian hero king, life on the run was over. They no longer feared monsters. A new age of civilization had begun. History is written by the winners. Gilgamesh did not record the fact that he killed his own son. Instead, Genesis celebrated his heroism. The Sumerian dynasty chronicles wrote, Gilgamesh slew the legendary beast Humbaba and founded Uruk, the first city-state in history. As time continued to move forward, Gilgamesh began devoting himself to the development of civilization.